Welcome to Down the Garden Path. I'm your host, Joanne Shaw, landscape designer and plant lover. I enjoy discussing down to earth tips and advice to help you seasonally manage your garden and landscape. And I also aim to bring you interesting and relevant topics to educate you all about the landscaping and horticultural industry. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Down the Garden Path. I know you're probably thinking, what are we going to talk about in November regarding gardening? And I just want to come on here and say gardening season is not over. Um, it's just time to move indoors, right? Uh, I hope you checked out and enjoyed my last show or one of my last shows about bringing in your annuals, trying out to see what you can overwinter from their potted plants that you kept outside all summer. I got some great feedback about that. And so, aside from those, so if you brought some of those guys in, then that's great. You've got something to do, don't you? You've got some love to give to those. And we'll talk a bit more about those in a second. But otherwise, you have houseplants. So, if you're new to gardening, gardening outside, or new to gardening inside, I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad I can help you. So if you do not have any houseplants, that's okay. Do not rush out to buy any. I would just talk to a friend or two or three, maybe your mother, maybe your sister, and I'm sure they have one to share. They multiply, so don't be afraid of that, but they definitely multiply. And and also gardeners, just like outside plants, inside plants, we love sharing. So talk to the people around you and see if they have a plant to share or a cutting. Again, I'll talk a bit more about that. But most house plants are so easy to start from cuttings. And if you're like me and you kind of neglect your house plants in the season, in the gardening season, meaning all summer long since May, and now that you've come back in November, you're like moving things around, kind of going to get ready for the holidays. And you're thinking, oh boy, these guys need some love. So now is the good time to do that. And they still don't need a ton of work because because of the light changing here in Canada, and depending on where you are in the US or anywhere else in the world, if you're heading into winter, that part of the world, then your houseplants are, slowing down as well because the light, less daylight, just like we're kind of slowing down. They have less daylight, so they are just, they're slowing down. They don't certainly don't need fertilizing. Now is not the time to fertilize them. So not really going to be actively growing in the winter. They're still going to be growing. They're still going to be alive. They do not go to sleep or dry up or anything like that unless we don't water them at all. But yeah, so I just have some tips and want to inspire you. I have been growing houseplants for a long, long time. But I've kind of always grown the safe ones, the really easy ones. See? The snake plant, the ZZ plant, they pretty much can't hard to kill. A pathos, I have a lot of those. I can remember, I think some of mine originally come from an office where I worked over 30 years ago. They had pathos everywhere, and people would, you could take a little cutting and take it home. So I think I still have some of those from those plants. So that company's not around anymore, but house plants are great for that. And so yeah, so I have always kind of focused on the easy ones. Partly because I spend so much time outside and focused on that, and focused on, even in the winter, focused on designs and the rest of my business. I haven't particularly wanted to try anything super, super high maintenance. And high maintenance is relative. It's not like we have to take it for like an animal, like we have to take it for a walk or anything. But a new friend has inspired me to try some very different plants, and I'm excited to venture out. So I'm going to take you along with me on the journey. I'm learning about alocasias, and they are beautiful. But they are needy. And we've kind of come through um, oh my gosh, what are the insects? The little insects that they get, the little mites. Did that, and then I had to pot it up, and it's not so far not so happy in its new pot. But I did some research today, and that's typical. And in researching what's wrong with my existing alocasia, I learned that there are so many other really cool ones. So I'm really excited to learn more about them, and they will probably be a whole other show to themselves. So right now, I just want to inspire you that if you're already missing the gardening outside, and we are especially getting a kind of a cold here in the GTA, we are getting a cold and snowy early snowfall. And don't worry, it's not going to last. Just picture it as rain and getting good moisture into your lawns and gardens. So not to worry about that. And just to kind of give you something to look forward to, or maybe something to plan on giving for gifts, or even asking for gifts. I think I'm going to start doing that and asking for plants, especially those little pricier, unique ones for gifts. So yeah. So now's the time. If you've kind of been like me and you haven't really looked at them yet, now's the time. Go check on them. See what they need. Do they Are they a little dry? Like, feel them, look, stick your finger in. You can use a water meter if you don't, a moisture meter if you don't have one. Most garden centers, hardware stores will have something. It's just like a metal two-pronged, and it kind of gives you, wet, moist, dry, kind of basic information. But especially if you've got a very big container, sometimes it's hard to know how much water do they need. So that can be a tool in your toolbox. And another thing you can ask for Christmas. um, so dusting, are they dusty? Get a damp cloth, give them a little bit of love, and wipe up their leaves. They will like that. Sometimes have they been growing vigorously and you're like, wow, I can't believe how much this has grown in the last few months. Do they need a bigger pot? So, have a look at the roots, have a look at, if you have an inner, which I'm learning more that you should have a inner pot that's in a pretty pot. And so that you can look it up so you can get a better idea, like, are the roots coming through the holes? Is there a lot of moisture in there? And so that way you can water it and then you can take it out after a few minutes or an hour or so. And if there's still a lot of standing water in that pot, you can dump it out and so that way it helps with overwatering. I am a sucker for those fancy pots, much like this one. It's nice, pretty. I love the color. It matches my dining room, but it has no drainage holes. And I've always been I'll throw some gravel in and it'll be okay. But not necessarily always. And it depends. And that's fine for my like cheaper cuttings and self-grown plants. But if it's something more expensive and more unique, I think they deserve their own proper planting in a proper pot. So yeah. Um, so now is the time to do that. So you might want to pop out to your garden center or nursery and pick up some new potting soil. Or you can check out online. I will look up and see if I can post a recipe or two. There's a lot of recipes where it's almost more cost effective to make your own. So buying the like 3 or 4 ingredients separately and kind of mixing them up in a bin and kind of keeping them so that you can modify them too, because some plants, and I'm learning this too. Like, we all know orchids, or many of us know orchids if you're not familiar. Orchids do have like more of a barky, chunky soil. They're not in any type of garden soil. There's no dirt in them. Their roots are, because it's normally grows in nature, and orchids do in trees and on bark. So their roots don't grow like many other plants. So they like it to be a little chunkier and the water to drain right through. So, and there's other plants that do like it a little bit more, like more of your succulents. They like a little bit more of a different type of soil compared to some plants that might really want that moisture to keep them happy. So I am frustrated by that, because then how many bags of soil, like, it's just like outside, like, oh my gosh, we only have so much space, right? So I feel that I'm moving more towards having the supplies to make my own soil so that I can make it according to what that plant needs. especially if I'm going to start with some newer, more, challenging varieties, but beautiful varieties. So that's something to think about. But if you are new, it's okay to just pick up a bag of potting soil. Again, it's not the gardening soil. You can't bring soil from outside in. You want potting soil. And they will often sell in a few different varieties. So if you are growing succulents, they'll have a succulent variety. If you're growing something like African violets, they tend to have African violets, so they do have some categories, but you can just go with a generic potting soil if you don't know what you're going to grow yet. Um, so, taking it out of its existing pot, making sure there's no roots that are damaged or dried up, or maybe you've had too much water and they're kind of getting moldy and gross. Go ahead and snip those off. The roots aren't as fragile as you think they are. So they can, you can move them and kind of open them up if they need to be. And again, cut off anything that is dead or damaged, and then put them in their new pot. Now, again, I recommend having a outer. I brought a couple things to show you, and I didn't bring you that, but like like a cheap, maybe the pot that it came in at the garden center, if you bought a new one, and then put that pot inside a fancier pot, or like those two fancy kind of funky ones I have up there, or this one that I love up there, Transcendentia. It's kind of cool with a face pot. So yeah, so that is something that you can, do. And again, because of the less light and the shorter days, now that we're moving into winter, they won't need water as much. Maybe every week, maybe every week and a half, 2 weeks. In my experience, it's better to underwater than overwater because it's harder for them plants to recover from overwatering. So, but that combined with the fact that our heat is going to be on and our homes are going to be a little bit drier, you've got to kind of find the sweet spot on when is the best time to measure. And I know the watering meter is a good thing, but sometimes it's just your finger. Stick it down, see, does it plant really need water? I don't think you should trust the surface. Yeah, I think you really have to feel it or stick something in. Kind of like what I talk about for outside, doing the wooden spoon and checking that the water below the surface. You kind of need, maybe it's a popsicle stick or something like that that you stick in if you're not sure and you don't want to stick your finger in. Um, what about trimming? So I talked about trimming the roots. So if there's anything dead or looking gross or mushy, trim those up. But maybe you have hanging plants or like trailing plants that have really gone wild and you're not sure what to do. Take cuttings, give everybody a little bit of a haircut. And I bought this years ago. Isn't this fun? So it's a really kind of neat decorative vase. And I think it's the purpose it was. I don't know. This is how I use it. So I take cuttings of those pothos. These are some, so I gave it's actually my grandmother's. We lost her a few years ago and I got her variegated philodendron, and it needed some love, and it needed I moved it around and it was so long and tangled, and bare spots at the top. So I gave it a good haircut, and I love this little vase, like I said, that's almost like a piece of art. And I just emptied it of things that had been in all summer, and I could not believe how much of this was filled with roots. So I potted those guys up. So see what I mean about like when you start with plants, you get more plants. This is a little peperomia, and I didn't know if I could grow it from um, by putting it in water, and it did. It grew really nicely. I had a nice little pot in my kitchen, and it grew taller, 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 and then they started falling over. And I didn't like that, so I ended up snipping them because I just liked it being like more of an upright plant, and I don't think it was meant to be a trailing plant. So yeah, so I put these three in this little decorative vase in the other office here, my husband's office, and on the shelf. I may end up putting it in my office too, because I think that way I can keep a better eye on it. But I would like to find a couple more of these. I think they're really interesting. I've seen some more like modern ones or ones that look like test tubes, and I've seen some on Instagram on how you can make some of your own. But I really kind of like the ones that look like artwork too. So yeah, so if you are in that situation with if you have anything that's trailing, like I said, these are very common house plants. They're great with low light. They're great with neglect. They really are a great starter. Some are bright green. Some are. This one's more variegated. My grandmother was growing this variegated one. Some are more of a lime color, and this is very similar to the plant that I took from the office many, many, many moons ago, and that I have in a few other places of my house. So, so that is something that you can consider. And that is something when you ask, I mentioned before about talking to a friend or a family member, if they have houseplants, then that is something they may give you a few cuttings, and it's a matter of putting them in a vase. If you don't have something like that, that's fine. You can do a whole bunch. I have another vase in downstairs where I have more cuttings, and they almost look like a little bit of an arrangement on the table, and they're all cuttings of different house plants that are in water. So it's super easy. Doesn't have to be fancy. Put it in a mason jar. Doesn't matter. Doesn't necessarily need to be in a sunny window. Just leave them there till you start to see a good amount of roots grow. And sometimes I go beyond that, but make sure it doesn't dry out. So make sure you've got water in the vase. So it is a good idea to have something that's translucent that you can kind of keep an eye on the water levels. When I've done it, when it's been in something, well, like this one, I did struggle with keeping it because you can't tell. Is it out of water? I don't know. How much water did they take up? And so I knew I'd gotten, like, I could feel it. I'm like, ooh, it's light. I needed new water, but I never pulled them out to check the roots. And honestly, one I could barely get out. That's how full the roots were. So I was like, oh, so that is the downside of something like this is you can't really see what's going on. Whereas with something translucent like a mason jar or any kind of vase that you've gotten from flower deliveries, that type of thing, you can see inside. So you know about the condition of the roots and you know when you need to add more water. So that is a super easy way to start new plants and share new plants. So you can do a little plant swap with your friends, your neighbors, anything like that. So that is another way to think about it for this season. And now it's even early enough that if you wanted to give them as gifts, you can start them, get them rooting, and then put them in that nice little fancy pot, and you've got a great nice little gift for somebody for the holidays. So yeah, perfect way to share with a friend. I do also want to remind you, like, so if you've got taller ones, I have a large, very old, 35 plus years, rubber tree plant. And I'm bad for wiping the leaves. They're nice and green and glossy, and mine are coated in a thing of dust. So I'm trying to be better at that, of taking a damp cloth and wiping them. It just does help them. It helps them absorb nutrients. It helps them absorb the light. It does help them grow better. I didn't really think it made a difference, but once I've started doing that, I really can see that it does make a difference. Again, it's not something, a feather duster, if you've got, something like, especially if there's something with like big leaves, like a fiddle leaf fig, like a rubber tree plant, things like a Benjamina, ficus, with tiny leaves, that's much harder. But again, just do the best you can. Do not let the perfection, do not let perfection be the enemy of good. Like, do not, completion is better than being perfect about it. I normally have I don't know where that went. I had it across my notebook or my whiteboard. So yeah, so I just want to inspire everybody that now is the time that you can, and even if it's one or two plants, start. And I know it's having something to look after in as we get into the long winter is really nice. It does perk up your space to see something living in a space. It can really improve your mood. There's even benefits. I was talking about soil earlier. There are a lot of benefits. You can Google this about even having our hands in the soil, even potting soil. There is a lot of real benefits to our health for doing that. And so if you have somebody in your life who is an avid gardener and is kind of bummed about having to be stuck inside again, then this could be, and they don't really have a lot of houseplants, then this could be something that they, you could encourage, or they could be like me, where they might have a lot of houseplants already, but they don't have something that's like really unique and different. So you can kind of research what would be good for their space, and what would be, or funky names. I know my alocasia's name is Jacqueline, so I think it's cool that that variety has the name Jacqueline. So it's easy to remember as well. So sometimes when you see a plant and you learn the name, it can really stick with you. And so yeah, so that's another benefit. I did want to bring up, I in my last show, I don't know if you watched the video or if you didn't watch the video, but I talked about bringing annuals inside, and I showed pictures of these cuttings I'd taken of my neighbor's coleus plant. So not even my coleus plant. I took these cuttings, and I couldn't believe how fast I just had them in a tiny little, because they're really not very big, like in my hand. Um, I just put them in a little jar in my kitchen, and honestly, 2 weeks, tons of roots. So I just potted them up. I didn't do the pot inside the pot, but I'm excited to see how these do. So I'm right now going to put them in a low light room in my dining room. I may move them to the basement if I think they're getting too leggy, and I'm going to do a little bit more research. I don't claim to know everything. I just love that I can talk about these things, and that you can learn along with me about houseplants, saving your annuals, anything like that. So everything about growing. So like I said, it's a journey down this garden path, and I love sharing it with you. So those are some of my tips. It's a little mini episode today, but I wanted to encourage you. Please message me. I'd love to hear if you don't have any house plants, if you want some suggestions, if you grow alocasias and you have some tips for me, if you uh, have plants to share. If you've ever done a plant swap with friends, I'd love to hear about it, because I think it's a great thing. And even at places like Facebook Marketplace, like, people don't want to just throw them in the garbage. They often are. There's lots of different ways to get new plants economically. So yes, and again, they do tend to be the more basic ones, but that's okay. I personally think every room should have a plant or two. I think it really does brighten up the room. Doesn't necessarily clean the air. I know I need to go back and speak about that, because I've done one of my first radio shows. Oh my gosh, almost 11 years now, you guys. I think, yeah, 11 or 12 years. I have to go look. I started my show in November, 12 years ago. And there was a study released in 1989, of all places, by NASA, that talked about the benefit and how much houseplants clean the air. That has since been refuted. And that study was done in a real sealed space, which our houses are not sealed that way, and really just a little bit out of context. So we would need to have like a ton of plants per square foot in order to really see that clean the air benefit. But I do feel that they do add some humidity to our space. They do add some mood lifting boosts to our space. I think there's a lot of benefit for looking at after our plants, and it helps you kind of stay connected to nature during the long season. They add humidity. You want to, as far as the air is drier in our homes in the winter. So there's different ways you could add some humidities. You could put them on a tray of gravel and water in that tray, especially if you've got holes in the bottom of your pots, to add a little bit of humidity to your air. You can add a humidifier, and that can help the plants and you as well. You definitely want to not water too much, and you don't want to do that and has the water logged. So yeah, and I also feel like they do in when I said every room should have one. Like, I really feel like they can be artwork too, right? Ones that grow upwards, ones that trail. If you've got high shelves, you could have them trail. So I think they can be added. That's why plastic plants and artificial plants are still so popular, is because they do make a space. Even though they're artificial, they still make the space look better. I just think it's worth the effort to try and find the plants that will grow in your space, that are real plants, as opposed to artificial plants. The other thing I didn't talk about, and I will do another episode that we can cover, I really focus now on foliage plants, although there are some, like the coleus, which has got a beautiful color. There are some great, like Rex begonia. If you have a bright kitchen, if you have one of those bright south-facing kitchens, a croton, Croton, have colorful, like rainbow foliage, not really flowers. There's some really cool houseplants that have great foliage. And I think that's a good way. So it doesn't have to be green. You've got some silvers, you've got some variegation, you've got some burgundy leafed things, and Rex begonia comes in so many different colors, foliage that I think there's always one for another spot. And I'll save talking about flowering house plants for another episode, because I think there's some that make great gifts as well. And I'll just give you a teaser in the sense of orchids and oh my goodness, I'm going to say orchids and right in my head, amaryllis. So you know how much I love, if you listen to me for a while, you know how much I love amaryllis. Special place in my heart because that was one of my mother-in-law's favorite flowers. It really is a bulb, but it's such a cool gift. It's so fun to grow for yourself, but it is fun to give to others, especially people, especially kids, because once that plant starts growing, it's so cool for them to measure and watch. So there's lots of ways we can bring houseplants and, well, in that case, a bulb into your home and into your space. And maybe they're all in one room. Maybe you only have one room has enough light and you can really kind of dress it up. That's okay too. I kind of have mine scattered all about, but it really just depends. So I do wanted to cheer up. I just wanted to cheer up on this snowy day. I wanted to cheer up all the gardeners out there to say it's not over. We can continue gardening inside, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. So again, I'd love to hear about your houseplant journey. If you have a favorite houseplant, again, are you growing alocasia? And so please comment on the blog, on my website, or on the podcast in the show notes. I would love to hear from you. And let's continue to grow. And thanks for joining me, as always, down the garden path.